Whether we're catching flights or catching sunsets, staying hydrated is a non-negotiable.
Fiji water is always in our carry-on. It's really from the islands of Fiji, and you can taste the difference.
That soft, smooth sip, it's the electrolytes for me, more than double compared to other premium waters.
And the 500 milliliter bottles, 100% recycled plastic since 2022. We love a travel companion that gives back.
For your next trip, layover, or beach escape, pack Earth's finest water.
Fiji water. Hydration, but make it luxe.
From 1989 to 1995, Nurse Kristen Gilbert murdered 4 of her patients at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Massachusetts, and she's suspected of killing dozens more. On Mind of a Monster, a podcast from ID, criminal psychologist Dr. Michelle Ward dives into Kristen Gilbert's twisted mind to try and find out why she killed her patients and how she was able to do it in front of her colleagues. She speaks with detectives, journalists, nurses, and victims' families to unpack Gilbert's life and crimes on Ward C. Listen to Mind of a Monster, The Killer Nurse, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, fans of freedom and open discussion, I'm heading over to Substack, and there's an ad-free audio and video version of the Adam Carolla Show that's going to be waiting there. In the near future, you'll even be able to watch ACS Live, unedited, as we record it, participate in the show via live chat. That'll be coming up very soon. You'll also get an ad-free version of the Adam Carolla and Dr. Drew Show. You'll also get an exclusive to my new podcast, Beat It Out, where I share unpolished ideas with my comedian buddies. The first series of episodes is going to be Jay Moore. You'll get all this and more for the low, low price of $9 a month, a pittance for all we're going to bring you. Subscribe now at adamcarolla.com/Substack, and I'll see all of you in our new speakeasy called Substack.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Welcome back to the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host who gets results. Hey,
there
Brett.
You go. I love it, Alice. We need to have awesome guests more often because I feel like whenever we do, you say such nice things about me.
You know, we all know that descriptor has nothing to do with you at all, because today we have back one of our most popular guests from earlier this year, Ivan Bates. Ivan, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. I just love being here.
Well, the feeling is mutual. Guys, he really needs no introduction, but just in case you've been living under a rock, Ivan Bates is currently the state's attorney of Baltimore, Maryland, and he's also newly elected the president of Maryland State's Attorneys Association. He's presiding, or not presiding, I guess you're not a judge, maybe yet, but he's currently the prosecutor in the Adnan case. We've spoken to him about that. Stay for this entire convo because I hear that he has a little update for us. And he is here today mostly because you guys have heard about skyrocketing crime across the country. It is on the news every time you turn it on. We see devastating, brazen murders, broad daylight in public spaces over and over again. But Ivan ran on wanting rule of law, and he came into Baltimore and not only has kept his word to prosecute those who break the law, but what he's doing has resulted in real change in Baltimore. He's going to talk about it. But guys, we're talking about from his administration to the previous administration of just big numbers here. We're talking about cutting homicides by almost 50%. Is it more? 60%?
Yeah,
I mean, we are talking 60%. We are talking victims who are no longer victims because of what he does. We're talking about doubling the number of people who break the law and are held accountable. We're talking about not letting people go and dismissing charges and taking easy plea agreements, but putting people where they belong so that they cannot reoffend. Ivan, I'm going to stop talking now because the work you've been doing is exhausting. I don't know when you sleep, but most importantly, it's making Baltimore and therefore America safer. Thank you for what you do.
No, first of all, I want to say thank you for that awesome introduction. I have to say the one thing that I really have loved about having this job is the people. I just work with some of the most amazing people and most amazing public servants. One of the things is prosecutors don't get enough credit. The most prosecutors are pretty quiet. They want to do their job. They're unsung heroes. And in my office, there are some really great people who are working hard. They're doing the job every single day. So, give you a little bit about the background. When you look at homicides, the 8 years before I became state's attorney, the previous state's attorney was Marilyn Mosby, and there were 8 straight years of 300 plus murders. And I ran against Miss Mosby in 2018, right after the Freddie Gray incident, and I lost. And I had, in 2016, my daughter was born, and I had to make a decision. Was I, one, going to leave Baltimore City, the city that I had been living in since 95, or was I going to, and I moved out of town a couple of times, but Baltimore is my home, or was I going to do something different? So I remembered when I was a young prosecutor in Baltimore City, I was in the homicide division, I had a murder case. And it involved a man running on a playground with a bunch of kids, and he hunted down a guy, and he shot him in the back of the head and killed him in front of all these children. And that case always stuck with me. And I would take my daughter to the playground. I was always a little fidgety because I was wondering if this was going to happen here. And I realized that that was not the way that people need to live. And, I was a defense attorney. I had a very nice practice, but I really felt like, what, I had done everything I was supposed to do and shouldn't do as a defense attorney. I was beginning to feel like, I have a daughter. I'm seeing how crime impacts people on a different level, and I need to really focus and try to win. So I ran, and when I ran on 3 main things. One, the Baltimore City State's Attorney's office was in disarray. So office, it can't really operate with less than 175 lawyers, but they had 140 lawyers. Today, we have 200 prosecutors. So I ran on rebuilding that office. I ran on focus on violent crime. And I ran on quality of life crime. So when it came to the state's attorney's office, I came in, and January 3rd, 2023, I was sworn in. I did win. It was a 3-person race. I ran. I won. It was interesting because people were saying, oh, you're not going to win. You're not going to win. So I never got anybody in the establishment to support me, but one state senator supported me. One. Now, he also happened to be the most powerful state senator, but within his community, his vote really mattered. And, Baltimore can be pretty racially divided city in some ways, as many cities are. So you have what's called an L. He was a state senator, but the majority of his district was predominantly white. So his support was really big. That was a big part of the vote. Not the majority of voters, but like 35, 45%. But I realized they, one, did not want the incumbent, and the other gentleman who was running, Mr. Vignaraja, they knew him, and he kept running for office after office, and they didn't want him. So during my campaign, the Baltimore Sun, the main newspaper, endorsed me. And then I had a person who I call her just an angel from out of nowhere. She came, she put together a PAC. She didn't like the incumbent, and she didn't like the person winning. And she put $450,000 of her own money, did a television ad about who I was. So then all of a sudden, our campaign, we raised about $1.3 million, and you include hers, and people got to know who I was. And we won. And that's when we really began to make the change. So on January 3rd, everybody laughed because I said, look, in my speech, and it was televised by the local television station. And, everybody was kind of like, okay, so the former defense attorney, what's he going to do? But, if you ever know former judges who are defense attorneys, they literally are the worst sentencers. They're going to bang everybody when you've been a defense attorney, because let's be honest, you've literally heard every single lie on earth. And sometimes you're like, do I really have to say this in front of a jury? Do I really, or like, can I just say you're guilty? When you get to that point, it's time to quit the craft. So when I was in front of everybody, judges used to tell my clients when they were on probation, If you violate, bring a toothbrush. And so in my speech, I said, if you have an illegal handgun and you're a repeat violent offender, bring a toothbrush. And so that was not, and everybody like, oh my God, they never heard that. But if you're in the courts, in the trenches, you've heard that before. That message was to the criminal element that the time has changed, that there's no more second chance. If you already have a prior felony in the state of Maryland, then you qualify for 5 years without the possibility of parole on an illegal handgun. So the problem was people are, violent offenders are getting probation all the time. Look, I was, like I said, being a criminal defense attorney, even though I wasn't really doing too much Baltimore city or state work, I was doing a lot more federal work from 2018 until I won in 2022. But everyone you knew had probation after probation after probation. And what you quickly realize, I had lived experience. The only way you're going to change people is you have to send some violent people, you have to sit them down. They got to go to prison. Not your local jail. They have to go to prison for a substantial amount of time that they think about their consequences and their actions have consequences. And so that was the whole tenor. We came in and we changed the thought process because everybody received probation. It was difficult at first. We had to rebuild the office. We had to get prosecutors to decide they could go to court and win. And so what we did was we first started taking the trials, going to court. We were going to court, they would win. Well, if we won, the maximum penalty was 15 years, the first 5 without. So I told them, oh, if you went to trial and you won, why are you asking for 5 without? That's a 15-year case. So one thing that I tell people is, and when you're practicing as a defense attorney or a prosecutor, you're in the Division of Correction, pre-trial, there are 2 doors. One door that leads you home and one door that leads to prison. As a defense attorney, you want the door open to people go home because that's how you get business. As a prosecutor, you change people's actions through sitting through that door that goes to prison because they're going to talk and they're going to say, no, I'm not messing with them. So we began to understand is when they started getting the 15-year sentences, now they quit asking for trials and they started pleading guilty. And so the jail calls were a lot different. Some of the jail calls that were absolutely hilarious to me is like, man, Bates represented my dad. My dad said, Bates going to give you law. He's not playing with you, boy. He's going to send you to jail. And so he was like, man, my dad was right. Bates sent me to jail. And once you had that understanding, they knew that there was a different time period. It was going to be different.
You're literally describing the deterrent effect, right? And that's
1,000%.
That's why we're seeing the numbers. Like the first year you're in office, it's definitely a drop, but it's exponential as you go down, through your term because they're talking to each other, right?
Oh, 1,000%. But so this is what I realized. I looked at the data and we have Johns Hopkins. And one of the things I realized was that in Baltimore City, there were 5 to 6 violent repeat offenders who were causing most of crime. Now you're going to have some murder, you're going to have some domestic violence murder, you're going to have juveniles. You'll have people have some impulse control that just own a gun and they just can't control their actions. But basically, it's 5,000 to 6,000 repeat offenders. And so I want to give you some numbers. I think you have the other chart. It's the violent repeat offender accountability analysis. And so what you realize is that the mayor of Baltimore used to sit down and say, my police are making the arrest. I don't know what's going on. And he was right. The 2 years that the mayor took over in 21 and 22, in the last 2 years of the Mosby administration, the police in Baltimore City made almost 2,200 arrests for guns. In my first 2 years, they made 2,400 arrests for guns. Very similar, but this is where you see the change. About a third of the cases that they made for these illegal handguns, these are repeat violent offenders, they gave a third of them they dismissed them. And I understand there could be Fourth Amendment issues, all types of issues. A lot of these could be search and seizure issues. It could be a number of issues. But then they pled 656 cases. Plea bargains are basically you're going home. You're not going to jail. You're going home. And then they gave incarceration of 781 people. But then you have to look because it's not just one person. It has to be a collaborative effort. And so for our office, it just wasn't the state. It had to be, we had to work closely with the feds. In the 2 years, the feds took 98 cases from the previous administration. Now, the previous state's attorney did have some issues with the feds, so that could possibly have been an issue as well. And so, I don't know why there weren't more cases taken. But homicide convictions, there were 159 individuals convicted of homicide those 2 years. So they put 1,038 repeat violent offenders in prison. It's pretty, in 2 years. That's 500 and some people in 2 years. Well, to me, that's a drop in a bucket. In our first year, we only dismissed 475, and we gave a plea to 245. So what constituted a plea? Well, to me, there's a difference. So if you're saying a 40-year-old individual and you have a job and you have a son, the police raid your house and they find your gun in your safe, and your son's out there stealing drugs, and now the police found their way into your house, you're technically a repeat violent offender because you have a prior felony conviction. So you're eligible for 5 years without the possibility of parole as well. That wasn't the person we were after. We recognize you didn't change your life. You have a job, you're paying taxes, you're not running around the street with your gun. We wanted the people who are running around the streets and driving in cars with illegal handguns. The legal gun owners, we weren't worried about them because you're allowed to have your gun and you legally have your gun. We could care less. Protect yourself. That's your right. We wanted the illegal violent repeat offender. So we sent 1,723 of them to prison our first 2 years. The feds took 135 cases, but where we really went crazy, so to speak, was with our homicide convictions. 271. What that meant to me was that, look, the jurors in Baltimore City, they're everyday people. They see it. They were sick of it, and they needed something they could believe in. Our prosecutors in our homicide division were putting amazing cases together. They took their lumps. They learned. And like I said, when I was able to take over the office, it was like I was rubbing antiques. They were so good, but people looked past them. They had been beaten down. They were demoralized. So we needed to do something to help homicide. In Baltimore, you have a stop snitching culture, and people don't want to come to court. So we had to change that. Governor Hogan gave the previous administration $2 million for what's called victim witness. Well, the previous administration used that to basically run ads for the previous state's attorney, and they let everybody, the 20 or 30 people in victim witness, they all worked from home. I don't really believe you can work from home and be a lawyer because you got to go to court, and we have victim witnesses, and our witnesses and victims come to the courtroom. So we realized a couple things. Number one, our prosecutors were quitting and they were overwhelmed because they had too much body camera footage and they were looking at it all themselves. Number two, they had to be the number one person communicating with witnesses and victims. They had to get the discovery out. So let's take a random gun case, one of these illegal handgun cases. Say there are 5 officers, they do a car stop, body camera footage, they get a gun, and then they leave. That prosecutor receives that case, and they may have court on Tuesday and Thursday. They may have 7 to 8 cases on Tuesday and say 5 cases on Thursday. That's 12 cases that week. That one gun case has 5 officers. They have to look at all the body camera footage. That's 5 hours right there. Then you're going to have a slick defense attorney who's going to write a motion to suppress. Now they have to write a motion to suppress and do the research. So now that's 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours of research and writing. That's 8 hours. Now they have to prepare, and that's at least another 2 to 3 hours maybe. So they spend maybe 10 hours minimum on this one case, but they have 12 cases. So what the prosecutors were doing is they were preparing the cases they were gambling would go to trial. And if you were fortunate enough not to have your case go to trial, they weren't prepared. So you were getting those probation sentences. So what we were able to do, we petitioned the new governor because Governor Hogan stopped giving the money to the state's attorney's office. We asked the new governor to give our office the $2 million, and he did. But we had a plan. We went out and hired a person who was in charge of victim witness division in Baltimore County. And that was important because Baltimore County, that's right next to Baltimore City, they always had their victims and witnesses. They knew where everybody was. In Baltimore City, as a defense attorney, if I was quiet and sat in the back of the courtroom, I could jump up and say, I want a trial. The state was never prepared because they didn't know where their witnesses were. In Baltimore County, if you did that, they're like, okay, my witness will be here in 10 minutes because they had a person or people who were reaching out and talking to witnesses and victims. You had to build that relationship. So one of my first hires was a young lady named Amanda Grantham. We brought her into the office, and bringing her into the office, she brought that mentality. She reshaped the victim witness. So now when a murder happens, the police bring a witness in. We can move that witness and whomever else is part of their family immediately so no one knows what's going on. And we keep them updated with our victim witness specialist. So we've taken the onus off the prosecutor to talk to the witness and victim all the time. We have a victim witness specialist that's always talking and building a relationship. When they feel safe, people want to come to court and testify because I believe in the decency of the human being. If they've seen someone do a callous act of murder someone, they want to be there. However, human instinct says if he killed them, he or she would kill me. So I'm going to keep my mouth shut. But if that person's in prison, they feel confident that you're going to get that person off the streets for many years, then they'll come forward. That has really been, I feel, the secret sauce for us getting so many homicide convictions. And we held 29 people accountable. Those are our first 2 years. Now, I will tell you, out of that 5,000 to 6,000 repeat violent offenders, we've put about 2,700 of them in prison. And that has meant the world to us in terms of what's going on with our numbers of homicides. So like your first chart talked and touched bases with, in 2022, look, in 2020, there were 335 murders. Then in 2021, there are 338 murders. And then in 2022, they're falling little by little by little. I think, 2022, you had a number, 345, 350 some odd murders. But in that time period, you had 851 murders. My first year, there were 262 murders. Then last year, there were 202 murders. And as of today, there are 96 murders in Baltimore City as of today, which is unheard of. It has not been that low in 60-some years. In the history of elected officials across Baltimore City, there have been fewer murders under my watch than any elected official their first 2.5, 3 years in office. So I'm very proud of that.
Guys, let's be honest. We all blame the dog. My dog makes huge messes, and I like to say he's responsible for everything. Or sometimes it's the kids, but usually it's just me not cleaning up, not having the time, not having the energy. Well, that is where the Green Mitt Kit from Clean Safe Products comes in. It is the easiest way to keep your fabrics looking brand new in 5 minutes or less, which is so important to me because, frankly, I barely have 5 minutes these days. The process is simple. You simply spray the solution, wipe, rinse the mitt, and repeat. If you can clean a kitchen counter, you can clean your couch. It works on carpets, couches, car seats, wool rugs, delicate upholstery, even dry clean only materials.
You can avoid the nightmare of bleach spots or harsh chemical sprays in your living room, which is really important for me because I have so many kids. The Green Mitt Kit is non-toxic, fragrance-free, and made with just 3 ingredients. And because it's soap-free, there's no sticky residue, so stains don't magically reappear the next day. It's safe for kids, pets, and every soft surface you love. It removes the spots and the stress that comes with having nice things in a messy household. And it lasts forever. 1 bottle of concentrate makes up to 16 full-size bottles of the soft surface cleaner. You can try it risk-free. Clean Safe Products offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. No questions asked. I have a lot of kids, and my couches always seem messy until I started using the Green Mitt Kit. Even my kids love using it. That's how easy it is, and they can't mess it up because it is foolproof. Go to cleansafeproducts.com/prosecutors now to get $15 off the Green Mitt Kit. That's cleansafeproducts.com/prosecutors for $15 off the world's easiest soft surface cleaning solution.
Chicago, March 2nd, 1976. A savage double murder rocks the city. 2 young lives snuffed out in their prime. And the killer? A privileged rich kid caught within 4 days, only to walk free through a web of influence and power. For 4 years, the case gathered dust, the truth buried under the web of money, drugs, and corruption, until an unlikely hero emerged. Former rock musician turned star prosecutor who refused to let the justice slip away. Together with his determined partner, they dared to resurrect the case that Chicago forgot. Now, for the first time, step inside the investigation that brought a killer to trial. Convergence, the explosive new true crime book by Jonathan Dixon and Greg Owen from 26th Street Books. Convergence takes you deep inside one of Chicago's most shocking cases. Follow the evidence, witness the trial, see justice unfold. Convergence, available now on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
And these things, as you've explained, they don't just happen. You don't just sit back and hope and all of a sudden it happens. It's really interesting. You remind me of like a football coach who understands the fundamentals are so important. And that if you get the fundamentals right, everything else will follow. I mean, the things you're talking about are not the sexy things that you necessarily see, in the newspaper, hiring the victim witness person, making sure you have enough staff support, making sure you have enough. And I wanted to ask you about this. You're doing the best you can, but obviously you got to have a place to put these people. You got to have a budget. What kind of support did you get from the legislature and from the governor to take these steps that you took as state's attorney?
Well, it's pretty interesting. We get our money from the city, and so the mayor was the main one. Now, we asked for, I think, $900,000 for the body-worn camera, and our local city council and the mayor said no. So we had a brand new governor, and the governor was giving money away, so he gave us $900,000. Once we did that, that began to change the mentality. I will say this, the mayor and I, we have different views a little bit in terms of how we've attacked crime. He looks at it from a more holistic point of view. With our crime rate going down, the mayor has gone on a national talking tour of which he says, hey, it's my holistic violence interrupters are the main individuals and the main reasons crime is going down. And so we've been able to keep our budget the same, really hasn't given us that much. The mayor has a program called GVRS, that's Group Violence Reduction Strategy, which he wants to have funded. And I explained to the mayor a couple of times, look, if I don't have more prosecutors, I can't continue to do your program. So he's given us some more funding in our latest budget. But then again, they came and took money from me as well. And so, at the end of the day,
of course, homicides are down. You don't need any more. You don't need the money now, right?
Exactly. Well, the interesting thing about the mayor is that, he believes that there are two groups. One's named Roca and one's named Safe Streets. Roca, I will say, does phenomenal work. Roca takes individuals charged with illegal handguns, and basically you're in a program and they change your thought process. And you're there for potentially up to 3-4 years that you're doing every day. They're checking on you. They change your thought process. I've seen individuals change greatly. I really believe in Roca. But Roca's only so big, there are only so many people you can take. But the mayor talks about a program called Safe Streets. Well, Safe Streets is kind of interesting because the philosophy behind Safe Streets is you take individuals that were criminals and that they then talk to other individuals in the streets who are current criminals, and they convince them to drop their guns. It sounds good. And I do like the concept. But look, I was a defense attorney, so I understand what's going on for a number of the individuals in Safe Streets because unfortunately, some of them were my former clients. And they were never going to be that motivated to really change people's lives. And so to me, it's all important, but it's like a great defense. Defense must set the tone. And if you have a weak defense and the offense is just running through them, then it's going to be a long day. But when defense smacks the bejeebies out of that running back and that middle linebacker hits him and knocks him down and everybody's fired up, it's a long day for the offense. And so we feel we changed the tone. Look, in Baltimore, we had to talk about Roquan Smith and Ray Lewis. So, I've always said, look, I'm Roquan. The mayor said he Lamar. I'm Roquan. I'm Ray. We don't win a Super Bowl in Baltimore. We don't have a hope unless you have a great defense. And so we really focused on locking up violent offenders. It's something that's also very interesting because the other side of it is mass incarceration. And so, look, without a doubt, I'm a Black male, and you have people say, oh, my God, you just want to lock up Black people. And I tell them, have you bothered to look to see who the victims are? Because a lot of the victims look like the defendants. And it's not a race thing. It was a crime thing. And I think having represented individuals, I understand there are individuals who have some mental health issues. We have to put them where they belong, deal with them appropriately. But there are a number of individuals that do crime on poor, unsuspecting victims who are doing nothing more than working hard, paying their taxes, and they deserve to be in a safe environment. I could really care less what your background, your race, anything. If you did the crime and you have a gun, you robbed or shot or killed someone, we are going to put you in prison.
Ivan, you've already touched on this, but I think this is so important for those people who are trying to turn their own communities around. You've said that you've put more people in jail than the previous administration, but it's not just that. Like you said, you're putting the right people in jail because not all criminals are created equal. You said that they're violent criminals. Can you give us a little more insight into who you are prioritizing to prosecute and to put in prison that has resulted in these big drops? How much of these are violent repeat offenders? What kind of reoffenders? What's their age? Give us a little insight into what you're seeing.
Well, when you look at the chart, every person here that we charged with the 2,443, every single one of those individuals were violent repeat offender. Those are the individuals that previously had felony gun charges and a conviction. They're the people that had burglaries, they had robberies, they may have had large amount of felony drug convictions. They're the people who have done the violent crime. And they're the people that have already had a chance. Most likely, under the previous 8 years, they probably already were on probation once or twice. And now they come back a third time. We also look, like every jurisdiction, we have issues with juveniles as a whole. That would be a whole nother podcast.
Isn't that the truth?
But you ain't lying. But for us, we focused on the violent repeat offender who just was going to run around and shoot. On the violent repeat offender who just was going to run around and shoot. But also things that people don't realize. Of that 5,000 to 6,000 people, 40% of them were the victims of the homicides. So they were also the homicide victims. Now they're in prison, and they're in prison for 5 years without the possibility of parole. The research, the data says, look, 3.5 years, 4 years, that's the time period when it comes to some of those crimes, it's going to take you to change. Now, when it comes to the murders and things like that, we're getting life sentences. Today we had a prosecutor that had a sentencing where she had 3 convictions on one murder, and one person received life plus 20. One person received life suspend all but 100, means that they have to do 100 years, at least 50 years before they're even eligible for parole. And the other received life suspend all but 50. So we've gotten significant sentences that when you're out here doing that type of violence and you're out here hurting members of the community must be protected. And you must put violent offenders, repeat violent offenders. Not every person needs to go to jail. Once again, that's where you may see the pleas accepted. There's a difference between a 38, 39-year-old person, 42-year-old person that's working that has a gun and is like, look, I didn't necessarily realize I lost my right to have a gun from my background. We're not looking to put that person in prison. We want you to continue your job. We want you to continue to work. But now, you're probably going to be on probation. I understand that you have an opportunity to go ahead and not go to jail. That's the type of person that we're not focused on. But if you're a violent repeat offender and you're running around with guns and outside, because people have what's called impulse control issues. You're out there, you get in an argument, next thing you pull from your dip area, your gun, you shot the whole block. Now your gun's at home, you have to stop, go home, run upstairs, get your gun, put in your dip, run back out. By that time, everybody's gone, And so, look, they're not changing all the behavior. They're just being a little more sophisticated in how they do some of their criminal activity.
So I don't want to do a whole podcast on it, but since you brought it up, I do want to ask, because we are seeing younger and younger kids commit more and more violent acts. It's really their first. I mean, we're seeing 16-year-olds shooting people, killing people, younger than that. Mm-hmm. How are you dealing with that problem of teen violence, gang violence? How do you address that in Baltimore?
I will say this. Out of all the issues in terms of that I thought I was going to have being state's attorney, juvenile was not on the bingo card, but juvenile has been the worst. Our governor named a man named Vincent Schiraldi to be head of DJS. Vincent Schiraldi pretty much is very well known because he does not believe children should ever be locked up almost for no matter what. And so one of the things that we realized, we would have juvenile facilities, and every state is different. In Maryland, certain crimes, automatic jurisdiction, you're an adult in the system, adult system. They file a motion to have the young person sent back to juvenile system. Some states like Texas, everybody's a juvenile. However, the sentence you get could make you an adult as you're doing your time. That's not what's here in Maryland. So a juvenile can be found what they call fact sustained in the juvenile system, which is guilty, and they will be now sentenced to a facility in Maryland where it's supposed to receive services. Well, under the old governor, he had facilities at least 9 months. Under Vincent Schroeder, his facilities are now 2 months. So there's nothing you can do with a 15-year-old kid that takes a gun and shoots at someone else and misses, and now they're down the juvenile system. They're there for what, 60 days? Maybe let's say they waited, let's say 6 to 8 months before the trial and everything happened. Well, we know that kid who shot at those kids and missed, they're going to try to kill this kid now when they go home. So our issue has been, what do we do? The law was changed in 2022. It was so horrific that, and I'm going to give you some juvenile statistics real quick, that when, for instance, carjacking and auto thefts were really big in Baltimore. In 2022, there were 54 carjackings and auto thefts. In 2023, there were 64. In 2024, last year, there were 369 carjackings and auto thefts in Baltimore City. So that's how bad it had gotten. What we were able to do, I was able to go down to the General Assembly, and we were able to have some senators who really believed, and they convinced our governor to go ahead and roll back some of the 2022 law that basically let these kids do whatever they wanted to. And we also have in my office a division called MIU, Major Investigation Unit. And so they're the ones that do the breakdowns and looking at these major investigations. Once again, we wanted to do wiretaps, but our office didn't have enough prosecutors who had that skill set, not because they didn't want to, but they just were gone. So we hired a lot of prosecutors that came back. Remember, we went from 140 to 200 prosecutors now. Number of federal prosecutors with federal experience, and they came back to the office. So our MIU division, they did a wire on juvenile car theft ring. And I think we end up charging, 200 separate incidents or things like that of these groups of juveniles. Thursday night, they were going out robbing people from their cars and carjacking them from like 9 at night to about 4 in the morning. Then they'd meet up, do it Friday. They're playing video games at the house, do it all Friday night, all Saturday night. Sunday, they go home and go to school, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and do it all over again. So we were able to get them. However, most of these kids are now in juvenile. Then they go to a program, then they come right back out. And so that was something, but just the fact that we're able to do a wiretap on the young people, we need to change the juvenile laws, because if we do that, we could make some major changes. Now in Maryland, there's a state senator that wants to have almost every juvenile case start a juvenile system. Our problem is that our juvenile system doesn't have the adequate resources to do that. If we had a system similar to Texas or similar to some of the states down south, we may look at things a little differently. But we have no accountability for young people, and they do whatever they want.
And what a disservice to them, right? Like if you're running this ring and having 200 plus carjackings and no one's stopping you, of course you're going to enter an intense life of crime because there's absolutely no repercussions. I mean, not that that was good to start with, but no one's redirecting them or showing them that if they escalate, it's going to stop. That's incredible. And I've always felt that way, especially about serious juvenile crimes. And that's great that you are taking that under your wing, even though there's obviously so many other things you have to think about. Before we move from this, I know you have an update on some cases you're working on, but you just said that you had to hire something like 60 prosecutors or so. First of all, I'm just curious where you got that talent. And I can imagine working for someone who believes in the work that a prosecutor does invigorates people. We don't do this job for money, right? We do this because we care. So I know that can be inspiring, but can you talk to, our listeners as if you're walking in, you've just hired all these prosecutors, where you find that talent, but how you get them excited to do a ton of work, by the way. You're hiring them to work really hard, not to sit around and, twiddle their thumbs. I want to hear the full force of, Friday Night Lights type of pep talk.
Well, first of all, I think the best thing I did was my executive team. They are absolutely, I tell them all the time, they don't need me. They're just superstars in their own right. So, for instance, one of my deputies, Catherine Flynn, she was a defense attorney. We did the Freddie Gray case together, but she's the person I call the glue. You need that person who just knows how to make an office work, knows how to talk to people, get things done, and is a problem solver. So we hired her. But then I had a gentleman who runs my felony division, my hardcore gentleman named Tom Donnelly, former prosecutor. He was in the military, special forces, Afghanistan, just a real, I'm going to kick your butt, but militaristic, and he understands taking care of his people. And he's a fighter, and he knows how to hold people accountable. Just a great guy to work with. And so we brought him. It's funny because he was a prosecutor, but he was my wingman who wrote a lot of my briefs and motions. We would go to federal court. As I say, we made some really good law for the defense. Wasn't so great for the states sometimes, but we also made some bad law for the defense too. He had that both sides. Then he also ran a practice. Then we also looked at the person who was already in the office, a woman named Greg Solomon, who had been there. We were young prosecutors together. She's been at 25, 26 years. So people believed in her as well. Once we had them, then people say, hey, I want to come back. Look, I had a pretty decent reputation of being a pretty decent trial lawyer. So people wanted to come back, but we did things that also made you want to come back. There was no training for young people. We were convinced the district court judge, and that's where we have a lot of our non-felony cases, and that's where the young prosecutors start. We convinced the district court judge not to sit every other Friday because there were so few cases because the police weren't making a lot of arrests. But every other Friday, we do training. And we would train the prosecutors to say, hey, let's go down to the police department. Let's see how they handle evidence. Let's learn how to read reports. We took them to a point they knew nothing, and then we began to train them. Catherine and I would go to the local law schools to talk to them about being prosecutors. And we had other people we knew weren't super happy. They wanted to come back. But then we began to change the culture, and people decided they wanted to buy in. And now the funny thing is, we know what we must be doing a pretty good job because now people are trying to poach our prosecutors, which is a good thing. One of the things that we recently did, we did not have what we call SALSAs. And, those are state's attorneys that are also now cross-designated to be federal prosecutors, AUSAs. We didn't have the skill or the talent to go send people to be SALSAs. Last week, we sent 2 over there, and that was really big. The other thing I think we've done, we've allowed prosecutors to be prosecutors. Why I say that, we have the MIU, that team. And let me just tell you, in the last 18 months to investigation, this division, it's only about 5 or 6 prosecutors. There was maybe 1 prosecutor in that division, but then there was another in the office. He came, then the deputy of that division, the division chief, she was one of my first hires as well, federal experience, former prosecutor. Everybody loved this office, but they did not like what happened to it. So my whole pitch was, we're going to rebuild this the way it should be. And we're going to basically make sure that people know Baltimore City is going to be a breeding ground to have good prosecutors who love what they're doing. She brought friends with her and other people. But real quick, let me just give some stats. That division they did a couple wires, 8.5 kilos of cocaine, 3,532 gel caps of fentanyl mixture, 15.75 kilos of fentanyl mixture, and 110 pounds of cannabis. That one division in 18 months. And we have cases now, wiretaps going continuously that we're bringing down organizations and groups. And now it's gotten to the point that we have some federal agencies just come to us to try to work with us. So we've really worked hard to let prosecutors do the best and do the work that they want to.
Let me ask you this. You're now the president of the Maryland State's Attorneys Group, whatever it's called.
Association, yes,
Association, sir. There you go. That would be the word. Have you been able to sort of export this across the state? Do you run into problems with other state's attorneys, pushback? Are there political divisions that hold you up? How is that position going?
It's been going really, really well. One of the things, look, of course, you have Republicans and Democrats. Baltimore City is a Democrat city. Republican has not won an office in Baltimore City in 50-some, 60-some years. However, when I became president of the Maryland State's Attorneys Association, there were Republicans and Democrats, our whole state. Maryland's a blue state. It's kind of turning purple, but there are a number of Republicans in some of the smaller jurisdictions. But it doesn't matter. We don't care about your party affiliation. We're here for the same job, which is public safety. Public safety doesn't care whether you're Republican, Democrat, if you're male, you're female, black, white, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we keep our community safe. We work very well together. we have the same issues. We have issues with juveniles. That doesn't matter who you are because it affects everybody in the state. What I must say is it's been a pleasure because we really could care less. It's funny because I sat and talked to the U.S. attorney in Maryland, and Kelly is really nice. She's a Trump appointee. I can care less because we got work to do. So, you know what? The feds are helping us clean up this Baltimore City. I'm happy to work with them. If you're here to work with us, we're here to do the work. I can care less who you are, where you're from, your political affiliation. I just know that in Baltimore City, you have people that have suffered because they've been preyed upon by violent criminals, and that enough is enough. And that mentality is who I am. And I tell people, look, if the citizens of Baltimore City don't want me, they can vote me out. I'll be more than happy to go off in the sunset to do something. But right now, I feel that people really want change, and that change is about public safety.
Amen.
Thank you.
Ivan, truly, the last time you came on to talk, you're so busy. And by the way, guys, I mean, the last time we talked, you said that your guys had to pull you out of court because you're still, an attorney who wants to be there all the time. Obviously, there's so much. You're helping lead the entire state, hopefully replicate what you're doing, because imagine if states attorneys across the state and then across the country did this. I mean, this is how you affect change. This is real change, real numbers right here. But before we leave this and talk about some updates in other cases, do you have any words to maybe other prosecutors who are listening, whether they're leaders of their offices or not, of how to replicate what you've done in their communities?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is when you're a prosecutor, you're not doing it, as everybody knows, not doing it for the money. And I think as long as you keep focus on why you're doing the job. And we all burn out at times. And we all sometimes need to say, look, you know what, let me catch my breath. And that's okay. If you lose a case, but you've given 100%, that's okay. I think the thing is, understand that you're doing the best for the people. And when you work hard, people see it. I'm telling you, it is not a day that goes by that people say, hey, thank you for what you're doing, Mr. Bates. I appreciate you. Thank you, Mr. Bates. It is the most humbling thing. I'm with my daughter. We went to Chick-fil-A today, and we're sitting there. And next thing I know, a man comes to me and says, hey, you're Ivan Bates. I said, yeah, I just want to thank you. I told my daughter you were here because she's in Baltimore City, and she says, Dad, Mr. Bates, I see him on TV. These convictions, he's putting these violent people in jail. We're working together with the police. And that's the other thing. But people don't realize there was so much dysfunction in the relationship with the Baltimore City Police Department. That is also, if you don't have a good relationship with the men and women of law enforcement, you will not be successful. And what did that mean? Look, I was the defense attorney, so you think they're going to trust me? They actually did believe and trust me because I did represent Sergeant Leisha White. So they recognize, but I also let them know that, look, if you do your job, I understand mistakes happen. And if it's a mistake, we're not here to charge you. We're not here to embarrass you. We're here to get the job done. What you also see then is more productivity for the officer. When an officer risks their life to make an arrest on a violent repeat offender, and they then lock that person up, then that person goes home and never goes to jail. That officer feels demoralized. If that person is a violent repeat offender who's terrorizing that community, the officer knows it. The officer's done their job to get that person off the street. It's incumbent on the prosecutor to do their job as well. And I would say that's been something that's important. Always focus on the people that you serve, and you will be fine. I'm a big, big believer of that when you do hard work, you keep your head down, the people see it. And that's been the most humbling thing. They will see the work you're doing.
Amen to that. Thank you for being such a powerful voice for law enforcement and prosecutors, really our entire justice system. But I know that you, before we started recording, said that you wanted to share some updates about Adnan. This is a case that has been going on for decades. And of course, most, I guess, famously, shall we say?
I thought it was over.
I thought it was over. So those of you who have also been living under a rock, you may remember that the previous administration who created those wonderful numbers, that was really where Ivan got to come down from. So, you can't have all the success you have without the previous administration, filed a motion to vacate the conviction in, is that right? motion to vacate
Yes.
in
Motion to
Adnan's
vacate.
case.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
Ivan Bates not only came in and did justice, he did a thorough investigation of the actions that led to a completely unsupported motion filed by the previous administration. So we thought the case was over. Everything was done. But
Yeah.
Go for it.
A lot has happened. There's a podcast, and actually they even quoted me on their podcast based on our interview.
I noticed
And-
that.
Yep.
Glad somebody's listening. Listen more closely.
They really should. They should pay attention in the near future, especially. But HBO filmed 5 episodes, and I think the 5th episode on the 18th is going to be released. And when they release this episode, they're going to kind of break it down, and I guess it's going to really focus on the motion to vacate. And on the Undisclosed podcast, boy, they came at me kind of hard. I'm not necessarily going to say call me names, but they insinuated things about me, and that's fine. And, I've always been open and say, hey, I looked at it, that demand should have been released. And then when I looked at the evidence, I was like, oh, okay. But it was different, and especially when you look at the motion to vacate. But one of the things you always need to do is you need to look at read all the transcripts. It's different between it being a talking head and then you're actually being the prosecutor, the state's attorney. Well, one of the things that we began to do is we began to really understand, look, we had a 90, 80 some page brief. Most people aren't going to read that unless they're lawyers and legal nerds. Let's be honest. They didn't even read the 9-page handout that we've done either. So most people are visual. They want to hear what we have to say. And so I did a presentation, myself and another person in my office, Claire, who once again is another new hire that we brought to do post-conviction work. And it's just phenomenal, very, very smart, and really helped do a lot of the work with our motion to deny the motion to vacate. Well, we spoke to the National Black Prosecutors Association. We gave a presentation. Based on that presentation, we broke down what was written in the motion to vacate, what the law says you can have for motion to vacate, and we broke down, really, for me, the number one most important piece of evidence of why we had to deny the motion to vacate. It was clear. And not only that, we are also going to release a video of that presentation. Not the whole presentation, but it's like a 5-minute piece. When we release that video, let's say it's probably going to be very similar in time to when HBO does what they're going to do. But when we release the video, I think it's important that we also have snippets and clips of the evidence that the world probably hasn't really seen. And so remember, for me, the big thing was always that there was an interview by a member of the Syed review team, and that's what we call the prosecutors that Ms. Mosby had that looked at all the evidence. And they interviewed one person. And, we've never disclosed this person. I'm not going to say her name. But based on this interview, that was the crux, supposedly, of this note that they found that led to the reasoning behind granting the motion to vacate. And they never spoke to the prosecutor, Kevin Yerrick. We spoke to the prosecutor, and we talked about what he said, this note, and it wasn't what they said in the motion to vacate. But we also found out that they interviewed the person who allegedly called Mr. Yerrick 20, 30 some odd years ago. And we focus on the notes that they wrote from their interview with this person. And that to me was match, game, set, over. Because what they wrote in that motion to vacate is not what the notes were written and what they said from their interview. And it's interesting because they did the interview in July of 2022, and they filed a motion to vacate in September of 2022. And there's nothing that we could find that said there was anything different or any new evidence than what was written in this note. Now, it's interesting also, this note wasn't necessarily easy to find, let's just say. So we're going to have a presentation where we break it down and we release it. And like I said, the public will be able to read different things themselves.
I mean, it's nice to do that because I like facts over propaganda, and I tire of this. I mean, Adnan Syed killed Hay Minlay. He murdered her. He spent 20 years in prison for it. You, I think, graciously agreed to his release because he was a juvenile. We're just talking about juveniles and all the things that go in there. But it's not just saying he's innocent. You also have the slandering of all these other innocent people who had nothing to do with this and get called murderers and everything else. And I don't know. So I really appreciate you continuing in the wake of podcast, HBO, all this other stuff, just putting out this tired, baseless propaganda, celebrating that motion to vacate, which was really like a crime against the profession. I mean, I will be blunt about this. It was a disgrace. And I will always appreciate your stand when it comes to this case.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, as prosecutors, I think the good thing is you do wear the white hat, and we do have a duty to do the right thing. And it's hard. I tell everybody, if I had never done the Freddie Gray case, because the hardest thing to do was to represent those officers, and I knew what they were facing. And everybody was, oh, they're terrible, they're killers of this or that. The hardest thing was to do to stand up and represent them because you knew that they had rights. I saw the evidence. I knew what was going on. I knew what they didn't do. And, and I knew what was happening. But when you're able to stand up, and that's what prosecutors do, we stand up for truth and justice. And that was very important to us. We sat down. Once again, when you work with great people, we all looked at and came to the same conclusion. And you follow the law, it was a no-brainer. And it's funny because we'll talk about when I say we knew what we had to do the right thing. And so for me, at the end of the day, as prosecutors, sometimes it's very hard. But when you do the right thing, it's not as hard as people think.
Wow. It is very hard what you do. And I just want to echo what Brett said. Thank you. Thank you for fighting in Adnan's case, because I actually think, yes, the people who have been re-victimized and also dragged through a case that they should have been able to live their lives, they've not been able to. You've helped people in this case and you continue to fight for justice. But because of this case that has a national spotlight, has documentaries and podcasts that are listened to all over the world, you are speaking for truth and justice for all of these cases that go beyond the Adnan case. So thank you for what you do. It is a big deal. It is not easy. It is the fight every day that you get up to do. We've kept you for an hour. I want to keep you for like 10 more hours, but I want you to go fight crime, because every hour you're here, I know you're not out there. Well, first of all, sleeping, but definitely not doing the good work. So I want to make sure that you have the last word and anything else you want to say before we give you a little bit of your time back.
Before you say the last word, I want to praise you for everyone, because we had to reschedule twice. We had to delay today. And there are a lot of people who are doing important jobs who probably would not have been as flexible as you are. So I just want everybody to know.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for connecting us to Allison Healy.
Yes.
She's awesome. Thank you so much for that. I do want to ask you one more question, and then you can have the last word. Because last time you were here, you did say if you discovered new evidence, you would reconsider Adnan's case. I assume you're not reconsidering Adnan's case at this point. You haven't seen anything that makes you think he's innocent.
No one's brought us any new evidence. No one's talked to us. It's been crickets on that front.
No one's giving you new bombshell evidence.
No bombshells?
No bombshells?
I'm shocked.
No bombshells. Boy, now it depends if you listen to some podcasts, they think they have bombshells. But God dog, same thing you've been saying before. If you really look, you've made these arguments before. So look, I understand when you have somebody who you really believe in, it's difficult. I get it 1,000%. But I will also say, for me, I didn't really like the way that they attacked Kevin Yerk. Because, look, I worked with Kevin Yerk, and I can't say we were friends. We were friendly. But anybody who's a prosecutor, you're a public servant, and you do the best you can do at that moment in time. And you may look back. There's a zillion cases I probably handled that I could have done differently. But to attack Kevin Yerk for doing his job, something he did 20 some odd years ago, if you think he made a mistake, then call it a mistake. But some of those personal attacks were very, very wrong. And so I think as a prosecutor, that was something that really offended me, because I just felt that was wrong to treat the man like that, because he was in the city, then he left out to, I think, Cecil County, It's probably about an hour and a half outside of Baltimore City. He just wanted to retire and fade away. Is a very quiet person, doesn't really bother anybody. And not a type of person to say, look at me, look at me, look at me. Just one of those people who's like, this is the case that wound on my desk and this is my job. And that's how most prosecutors are. And that's why, to me, I think it's very important you do stand up for prosecutors, because I just realized how much work prosecutors do, how dangerous sometimes our life can be when you put violent individuals in prison, and, especially in this day and age. And I just think, it doesn't matter where you're from, but we're all brothers and sisters in this work. And, it's been an honor to be the state's attorney of Baltimore City. I truly have loved this job. I truly because of this job, I got to meet you guys. I got to be on this podcast. It's been great, and I think that's the beauty of what we do. And that's why, I'm going to be super flexible with you guys. I think what you guys do is great. You bring lots of stories to life. The story, I think, what's her name? Karen Reed up there. And what's that her name? Up there in Massachusetts.
Yeah,
that's her name.
That is the exact response you should have.
Yeah. So exactly. So I've got to follow that. I didn't have time to really pay attention, but I listened to you. I followed you guys. And so because you get to hear it from the prosecutor point of view. And so there are very few people that share that viewpoint and that have that opportunity. One of the things I will talk about real quick, when I ran, I said, I'm going to do a murder case, right? Now, let's say I probably have tried, defense, prosecution, hundreds of murder cases, most of them on the defense side. I really forgot how much work it is to truly prepare for a murder case. Thank God, co-counsel, the guy had 2 cases. Thank God she got a conviction on the first. We filed life without, because the second one was a plea that ran, because he was never going to get out of jail ever anyway. But what I will say is this. It gave me another level of the appreciation of the level of preparation that we as prosecutors must do on a lot of these complicated cases, that good prosecutors make it look so simple and so effortless, but people don't realize the hundreds of hours that can go into preparation of a murder case. And that is the work that truly, truly public servants that are really just doing the job because they love it. There's no way you could pay them what they're worth for the hundreds of hours that they're putting in preparation. And so being a prosecutor has without a doubt been an absolute blessing and a joy to me.
You are welcome back anytime. And whatever we can do to make sure that your voice gets out there, we'll do, because you are just an inspiration for all prosecutors and really anyone in the judicial system. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time and rescheduling for us to come on. You truly have an open invitation to come back, and everyone in your office, the people you work with, sound incredible. We've gotten to meet a couple of those key players who are just as impressive as well. So thank you for what you do for us.
I got one last thing. I would be remiss if I did not thank my beautiful, lovely new wife for putting baby girl to sleep tonight and doing the homework and everything. So I would be remiss if I did not thank her, because if she listens to this and does not get a shout out, I might get in trouble. So, I'm not trying to be in any trouble. I'm trying, look, she's the one, they just walked past, they did homework, putting her to bed, the whole 9. So I need to thank Danielle for what you did. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Congratulations as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was my night, so she ended up doing it.
Well, it's very clear that you're able to do what you do because you have incredible support at home as well, because this is not a 9-to-5 job that you do. So I wholeheartedly say thank you as well, because that allowed you to be on our podcast.
Yes.
Wow. You guys, we love Ivan Bates. I know you do too. We have nothing to say, and that says a lot when Brett and I are speechless. Ivan, thank you for being such an example, truly a city on a hill, shining here as an example for how we can bring down violent crime, not only in your state, but in the country. But until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutors Podcast.
right. I don't want us to lose another minute with Ivan, so I think let's
It was
just
green, by the
get
way.
started. It was green. Where they chat on the side and they're guessing what I'm wearing.
Oh, okay.
But pretty soon you're not going to be talking about me, y'all. So I'm going to sign on so we can hear from the person we really want to hear from today. Okay.
And I'm Brett.
And
And this is the Prosecutors Podcast.
you're awesome.
Thank you.
I got too
Great.
excited.
Thank you. All
Thank
right.
you, Ivan.
Guys, I have to end the stream so we can download the thing. Thank y'all.
This September, CBS hits are streaming free on Pluto TV.
I'm coming in hot.
For this month only, you can watch full seasons of the CBS shows you love. From the courtroom drama of Matlock to the heroics of Fire Country. Go back to where it all began in NCIS Origins, or watch the hilarious hauntings of ghosts, all for free. Full seasons of the CBS shows you love. This month only on Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.